Hi everyone, my name is Matt and I want to welcome you to our class. We're so excited to have you here. There's so much I want to tell you about what we're going to be doing. But first I want to tell you one way in which this class is probably different from any class you've been in before. You will actually have two teachers. One of your teachers you just met there in the classroom. And then there's me, Matt. I'll be your teacher via video. That may seem a little strange, but there's a lot of cool things that we can do with video teaching. Like I can give you a list of instructions behind me. I can put up helpful images to show you things. I can even play videos behind me from classes that we've done before. You'll get used to having a video teacher pretty soon. Now, before I tell you about this class, I want to tell you about our prize box. In this class, we give out prizes for people who are doing a good job following directions, listening to the teacher, and working hard. First, let me tell you how we keep track of the points in this class. You might have noticed that up on the board or up at the front of the room is a list of all the people in the class. Everybody starts out with 2 points, as you can see here. Now, it's kind of like a contest. Your teacher will be giving you points all through the class, not just today, but all of the times that we're here together. The points carry over each week. Now, I say it's a contest because there's a special prize for whoever gets the most points at the end of the last class. The special prize is a $10 Amazon gift card. Whoever has the most points at the end of the last class will win the gift card. Now, as you might know, you can buy almost anything you want on Amazon. They have toys and action figures and dolls and stuffed animals and anything that you're interested in. You could buy something for $10 or you could pair it with some other money that you have to buy something bigger. All of the other people in the class who are doing good also earn a prize. On the last day of class, your teacher will bring a prize box, and everyone who's doing good in class will get to pick one prize if they didn't win the $10 gift certificate. Now, you might be wondering, how do you earn points in the class? There's a bunch of ways to earn points. Your teacher will be giving points all the time. The main way is by following these 3 important rules. The first rule is to work hard. Your teacher will always be on the lookout to give points to those people who are working hard. The second rule is to take the class seriously. Don't get too silly during class. We're going to be doing some great things in this class, and we really want you to take it seriously. Have fun, but do your best. The last rule is when we're at meetings like this meeting right now. There's no talking at the meeting unless you raise your hand. So like when I'm talking to you from the video here, you should be silent and listening. Or when your teacher is talking to you, you should also be silent and listening. If you do have a comment or question, you should remember to raise your hand. Your teacher will always be looking to give points to people doing a good job when we're at our meetings. So those are our 3 rules. There's a few other ways that you can earn points in class too. One way is that sometimes your teacher will ring a little bell. When they do that, that means it's time to come over to the meeting rug or the meeting area. We'll give you a little 10-second countdown that looks like this whenever your teacher rings the bell and asks you to come over. Your teacher will usually give a point to the 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 people, it's your teacher's choice, who come over quickest without running. If you run over, it doesn't count. Now, I do want to mention your teacher can also take away points. So if you forget to raise your hand, or if you're talking at the meeting, or if you're like the last one to come over and you are like really slow coming to the meeting area, your teacher could take away a point. In fact, I've asked them to do that if you are having trouble, just to give you a reminder. So I mentioned that everyone who's doing good will earn a prize, and the person who gets the most points will earn the $10 gift certificate. But you might be wondering, Matt, what do you mean by doing good? Take a look at this list of students behind me. Now in this class, you can see that Sarah would have got the gift certificate because she finished first. If there had been a tie, both of the people who finished first would get a $10 gift certificate. But in this case, it's just Sarah, so she gets the gift certificate. Now you can see that all the other people in the class were working pretty hard too. Everybody got more than 30 points, which is great. So in this case, all of the people in the class besides Sarah would have got to pick from the prize box at the end of the last class, and Sarah would get the gift certificate. But let's change things for a second. Let's say that Johnny just had like a lot of trouble in this class. Look at Johnny's points now. He was talking during the meetings, he wasn't working hard, he was being really silly, and he only ended up with 8 points. You can see that 8 points isn't very good compared to the rest of the students, so Johnny wouldn't get a prize. Also, I just wanted to mention this. I don't think this will happen with anyone in our class, but if Johnny was really having that much trouble, we might have to send an email home to mom or dad just saying how much trouble he was having following our rules. So I wanted to get all that out of the way. I think that you'll be doing great though, and that's not going to happen to anybody in our class. Okay, so remember to work really hard, listen to Matt and your teacher during the meetings, and take the class really seriously and do your best. We'll start the points now. Your teacher will start to look to give points. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our class. Now I want to talk about our class, Writing Wizards. This is going to be a really fun class where you get to write a novel of your own. Once you're finished writing the novel, you'll be able to do the illustrations, add the cover sheet, do an about the author page, a dedication, and we'll have the whole novel completely finished and ready to go. Here's a few examples of some novels that students have done in the past. Look how beautiful they look. Now your novel can be about anything that you want it to be about. It could take place in a land of kings and queens and princesses and princes and wizards and knights. It could be a Western story with cowboys and bandits. It could be an under-the-water sea story with talking fish. It could be a sports story or a horror story, or it could be any kind of story that you want to write. There's a couple of rules though. Number one, we have groups of either 2 or people working by themselves, so we'll decide on partners in a little while. The second rule, which is very important, is that the story has to be original. That means it has to be a story that you think up. If you wanted to borrow a character from like a story that already exists, that's okay, but your story should be new and original, something that you thought of. Now, before we start writing the story, we're going to do a little bit of planning. Like, for instance, did you know that J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter stories, she thought for 7 years before she started to write her story. She actually sat in a cafe and designed all her characters and the world it would take place in until she had everything planned out. Now, of course, we don't have time to plan for 7 years, but we are going to take most of this first class to plan our stories before we actually start writing the stories. The first thing that you're going to do is on a large piece of white construction paper, you're going to design the story world in which your novel will take place. You want to really think about your setting and what would make it interesting as a place in which to put a story. You want your story setting to be a fun place to read about. Think about the different people who live there or the different animals that live there. Think about who rules the place. What type of transportation do they have? What type of houses? What is the nature like? Is there anything different or interesting about the land? You're going to sketch that out on a piece of paper and then add some color to make it look really beautiful. Now, as you're sketching, start to think about who your main character might be and also some of the things that are going to happen during the novel. You want to start to plan that out. You don't need to draw your main character yet though. In fact, don't do that yet. We're going to do that in a little while. Just start planning out the setting, and we're going to work for about 20 minutes on that, and then we'll come back and talk about the main character. Your teacher is going to pass out a worksheet that looks like this that will help you with the planning of your setting. Your teacher will also give you a large piece of white construction paper to work on that as well. So here's what's going to happen. The first thing is that your teacher is going to help you make the pairs or people working by themselves for the class. And then after that, once you have your partner, or if you're working by yourself, you can start working on your story setting. Your teacher is going to look to give points to people that are working really hard and to people who are drawing really beautiful settings. and we're going to work for 20 minutes and then we'll come back and talk about our main characters. All right, let's put up the timer for 20 minutes and let's begin. Okay, thanks for coming back. Hopefully you were able to come back to the meeting area quickly and that your teacher was able to give out some points for people doing that. So I want to talk about our protagonists. A protagonist is like a main character in your story. Most stories have one main protagonist, although some stories sometimes have more than one. Like if you've ever read the book The Magic Tree House, you'll know that that book has two main characters, Jack and Annie. They're like co-protagonists. They're both protagonists. You're going to add your protagonist or protagonists to your story planner, the picture that you're drawing. You can also, if you want to, add an antagonist. An antagonist is usually a person who's like battling against the protagonist. In many stories, protagonists do have an antagonist that they sort of battle against, although in some stories, instead, the protagonist is fighting something else besides an antagonist. For instance, like in a story about a character, a protagonist who was trying to climb Mount Everest, the antagonist would actually kind of be the mountain because that's like the opposing force against the protagonist. Now, when you design your protagonist, you want to try to make that protagonist really interesting and different. Sometimes I call this a colorful character. Now, when I say a colorful character, I don't mean literally that they have like lots of different colors on them. Sometimes they do. But what I mean is that they're not like gray. They're not boring. They're interesting. They're exciting. They're a character that you really want to read about. For instance, one time I read this book. It's called Babe. They also have a movie that's really good. You might have seen it. It's a story about a pig, but this isn't just any ordinary pig. This is a pig who wants to be a sheepdog. A sheepdog is the dog on a farm that like runs around and makes sure that all the sheep are going the right way. And even though Babe is a pig, he really wants to become a sheepdog. And as it turns out, Babe is really good at being a sheepdog. Eventually, the farmer notices that he's good at being a sheepdog, and he enters Babe into a contest for sheepdogs, and a little pig becomes a famous sheepdog. Now, Babe is an interesting protagonist. I already told you about that twist that he wants to be a sheepdog. Also, he can talk. That's kind of interesting. And there's like a sad twist to the story, which is that his mom died when he was very young and he's looking for a new mom. Now, if you had a boring character, a gray character, it would be a lot harder to write an interesting story. Like, let's say you were writing about a pig who is just like a gray pig who sat around in the mud all day. Well, if you tried to write a story about that pig, like, what could you really say? Like, the pig got up in the morning, he lay around in the mud until noon, then he ate a little bit, then he went back to sleep in the mud. Like, there just wouldn't be very much to write about. So same with your story. When you plan it out, you want to make sure your protagonist and maybe your antagonist too are really interesting. Figure out some way to make them colorful. If you're writing about a princess, you don't want it to just be a regular old princess who's like nice and just sits around being a princess all day. You want something interesting about that character. As you're drawing your protagonist into your picture that we started earlier, I'm going to ask you to fill out a sheet that looks like this. It asks you to write down 3 interesting things about your character. 3 things that makes them colorful or different. And make sure the things you write down are really interesting. Like if you were writing about a princess and then your colorful thing was she's 8 years old. Well, that's not really that different or interesting. So you want to try to find something that's like really colorful and different about your character. So what we're going to do next is in the next 15 minutes, you're going to continue your story picture, but now you're going to add your protagonist into the picture. Do you see here how you can kind of draw your protagonist sort of big, like in front of the rest of your story setting? That's one good way to do it. You don't have to do it that way, but that's kind of a good way to do it. And also during this 15-minute period, you want to fill out your worksheet that will give you about your colorful character. It looks like this. All right, let's set the timer for 15 minutes. Your teacher is going to continue to look to give points for people working really hard. And let's begin. Okay, so your planners are coming along now, and pretty soon we're going to be ready to actually start writing our story. Can't wait to see those stories once you write them. I want to talk a little bit about something now called mind pictures. Mind pictures is a technique that we use in this class where you describe a setting so well that we can picture it in our mind. But sometimes authors kind of forget to do this. They'll describe like a new person or a new setting in their story, and they won't really describe it very well. Take a look at this part of a little story that I found. It says, "The fearsome four arrived at the castle of the old knight. They looked up at the castle. It was really, really old. The castle had been there a long time." All right, so let's do a turn and talk. I want you to talk with a partner. What do you think of that description, and what do you think was missing from it? Let's put the timer up for 30 seconds, find a partner near you, and let's turn and talk. Okay, well, as some of you probably said, the description was a little bit short. It was hard to really picture the castle in my mind because all they told us about it was that it was old. They didn't describe like what it looked like. They didn't describe the roof. They didn't describe much of anything. So here's another example, and see what you think of this one. The fearsome four arrived at the old castle, and it was nothing like they had ever seen before. The outer wall of bricks had crumbled to the ground long ago. They walked along a path that must have been a path at one time towards the castle, but now it was completely overgrown by grass. When they looked up at the castle, they noticed that one of the tall turrets had actually fallen over onto the roof. There had once been an entrance, but one of the huge stone blocks had fallen from on top of the castle down and was now blocking the way to the door. The windows had long been damaged, and all that was left was jagged spikes of glass. Tommy looked at Sue and said, "Can this place be real?" Turn and talk with a partner for 30 seconds. What did you think of that description? Ready, turn and talk. So hopefully you agree that the author that time did at least a little better job trying to paint a mind picture in your mind. That is, they described it a little bit better than in the first version. Anytime a new setting or person or character arrives in your novel, you want to write at least a quick mind picture so that we can picture that thing or person in our minds. We're going to earn some points today by practicing that. We're going to give you a small journal today, and we're going to ask you to write your own mind picture. We're going to start a scene in which some characters come upon a haunted house. We're going to ask you to describe the haunted house. Your teacher is going to be giving points for people who do a good job describing and writing this mind picture. It's kind of a lot, but if you can write a half a page just describing this one scene and this one setting, then you're going to earn 3 points. A full page is really tough, but if you're able to do a full page, that would be worth 5 points. Now, when you do this, just write the mind picture. Don't like start the scene. Don't have like the characters go into the house or anything. Just describe it, okay? See if you can do a whole half page or more just describing the mind picture. And as you start writing, your teacher will come around and your teacher might read a little bit of what you wrote to the class. Please don't be shy. We want to hear what's written. So you won't read it, but your teacher might come around and just read a little bit to kind of give everyone ideas. Okay, so here is the scene that you'll be writing a mind picture for. It says, Jim and Bobby came up to the house where they say that old Craggy the goblin lived. They looked up at the house and they couldn't believe it. It looked, okay, so that's where you're going to pick it up right there where it says it looked. And in your journal, you're going to continue from that point and write a great mind picture so that we can really picture what the house looked like. We're going to work for about 12 minutes on this. Your teacher can extend the time if you need extra time, but let's set the timer to 12 minutes and see how we do in that time period. Okay, let's set up the timer. Remember to earn those points, and let's begin. Okay, I can't wait to get back those journals and see what type of mind pictures you guys wrote. Um, all right, so for the rest of class today, we're going to finish up our picture planners for our stories and also our colorful character worksheets. So by the end of class today, hopefully you'll have most of your picture planned out and your colorful character planned out, so that next class we can get started on the story. So we're going to work for the rest of the class on that. Your teacher is going to continue to give points for people working really hard. And let's begin.